Yes, so we are very lucky to have the 30 years retrospective exhibition, the Artwork as a Living System. This was based on an idea and a concept that Karin Ohlenschläger, our friend from Spain who recently deceased unfortunately, had a couple of years ago. And she asked us, how about an idea to make a big retrospective where we focus on artworks that are mostly dealing with nature, with artificial life, with our relationship to artificial nature. And so we started, once we got the commission and once we started to, have institutions that were interested in this concept and in this exhibition, like the ZKM and also the Landeskultur GmbH in Linz here, and the email in Brussels, we started to really activate or reactivate and recreate many of the works that we had. Some of them already existed, more or less, because we kept showing them, like, for example, interactive plant growing. But other works have not been shown since almost 20 years or longer. So we really had to redo them. And Laurent spent almost 2 years, I would say, for recreating and rewriting the code and also reactivating many of the artworks that you can see here in this exhibition.
Yeah, so one of the particularity of our work is that the technology is usually not shown. So we see plants, we see screens, but we don't see actually the computers, neither the cables. So changing the technology was not an issue. You can always adapt with some other technology that is recent and port the interfaces or whatever was needed to make them work to the new technology. So I had the chance to write all this, it was by chance basically. I wrote this code in C++ and OpenGL, and these are still the standard today. So the code itself is still valid. However, you adapt it to a new operating system. So basically, it's a transfer of information, but the core still is the same. So what you see in this exhibition is the pieces you saw when they were created. And that's an interesting thing, because this is not always the case. Some works are sometimes bound to a certain technology with a certain aesthetic. Here is not the case, and so I could freely recreate these pieces and try to keep it as it was before. Of course, it's an attempt because things have changed, and as you know, the technology changes very often. And 20 years later, you have to rework a lot to readapt this work to make it presentable to the public. Especially the speed has changed also. Many things have already a lot more power than before. But these works were also built on very powerful computers in the past. So the gap is not that huge, I must admit. And so it was, for me, an interesting thing. Of course, I saw my programs and my codes when I was younger, and I program differently today. So it was an interesting thing to actually it's like reading old notebooks. Basically, it's the same. However, I think I saw when I did this work a kind of line of conduct. So it's you have your style, and if you have your own style, then it's easy to reread what you have done in the past. It's a lot harder if you have been working with someone else and trying to rework these artworks. Here it was not the case. So all these artworks here, I wrote it, I made it, and therefore it was not a big issue to actually change it and readapt it.
So maybe to follow up on what Laurent says, there are certain things that are the same as they used to be, like the code, of course, but there are also elements that change. For example, if we see here in the background the Eau de Jardin, which was originally shown in 2003 or 4, I believe, in Tokyo. And there we had different flower pots, because this was made for Shiseido, this cosmetics company, and they even designed special, transparent, very beautiful glass vessels for us. But these vessels, we could not ship them when we moved back from Japan to Europe. So they were left there, and from now on we started to use more normal flower pots. So the aesthetic of the pieces is changing sometimes, but overall we try to keep the spirit or the look of the artwork and even the dimension of the artwork as much as possible close to how it used to be. Or for example, in the case of interactive plant growing, which was our first work, We have a very sort of strict rule of how the pedestals have to look, how the flower pots look, how the screen looks, how the space looks. So there are certain fixed elements that should always stay the same, but sometimes it's necessary to adapt a little bit to the new projectors that are available, or maybe also to the plants that you get on site, because plants are always bought on site at each exhibition. And another thing that's maybe also interesting is quite a few of our works are in a collection at the ZKM already. So we are also very happy that there they have media art archivists who really take care of the pieces and also know about the pieces, their instructions, their lots of documentations of how the pieces should be installed. So this also puts a lot of pressure from us away, because we know that there are experts who can take care of these pieces in the future. Same for Evolve, for example.
That's right. So there are two domains. One is the creation of the piece, and the other one is the servicing of the piece, so that it's still running over time. And these are two different things. Of course, when you create the piece, you have to think about this servicing, and it should be as simple as possible, because it's not in your hands anymore. And therefore, you have to plan ahead a little bit so that the piece can survive without you, which is not always an easy thing, because, as you know, the technology has many issues, and it could be coming from different types of technology you are using. So it's a planning, but at the same time, it's a learning phase, and it's great to work with people who are actually taking care of these pieces, because they also learn your method, the way you do things, and it's not easy for them because every artist has its own method of working. It's not standardized at all. Its own programming environment, it's very vast, and so. We are collaborating with, for example, people from the ZKM to really take care of these pieces, and so they understand the needs and how they could manage it without the help of the artist. So this is an interesting coming up issue now, because it's old enough as a field to be put on the table and say, well, what would be the best strategies to actually keep these pieces. There are different strategies for, like I was saying, some works are bound to some devices that only exist at a certain time in history. So either you keep them as much as you can, so you can buy several machines and keep them in stock and say, well, if this one dies, we replace it. That's one possibility. Although it's not guaranteed that the machine doesn't get old without being used. This is also something linked to electronics. You can also ask the artist what they want. So basically, it's like, would you like to change if something happens in the future and the projectors are absolutely different than today? Will you accept that this is displayed differently? And so this is per artist discussion, and usually there is this kind of discussion for the conservator or people who are keeping the pieces. Because everyone has really a different idea of what the becoming of the artworks. So like, if you have really strict rules, and you say, no, it has to be this way, and otherwise we don't show it. Or, okay, well, it could be adapted, but how much? And so will it be really completely different, or will it be, no one knows what will be the future, so it's difficult, it's speculation.
But for example, a concrete example, the Live Writer, which is a typewriter that is adapted with the A-Live program, so you can see these creatures on a piece of paper. It has been, for example, now, it is in the collection of the Itaú Cultural in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, and there it has been exhibited a lot, but they also have a spare machine. So we also make sure that in case something breaks down, they can still, pull out the spare example and then keep showing it too. But of course, now that they have shown it so often and now that they know how it works quite well, I think they are probably quite good in taking care of it also already by themselves. But it's true, we don't know in 50 years from now, will this type of computer still be available? How exactly can it be preserved in the very long term? I think that's still a bit of a unknown factor. That's why I think lots of documentation about the work, also maybe interviews, showing maybe the concepts, writing papers about it, putting it in books and publications. I think all this is very helpful to sort of keep the artifacts, or at least parts of the artifacts alive. Because the piece itself, we don't know how long exactly it can survive. For example, interactive plant growing was at least shown 5 to 8 times a year. So Laurent kept updating it and kept changing it and kept putting it on different machines all the time. So we saw these kind of pieces that were very popular. They survive very well, even for 10, 20, 30 years. While other pieces that maybe were not shown so often or were shown only one time, we could not keep really restoring them because, you know, it involves budget, it involves time. So several of our pieces, I think they are dormant. They are not totally dead. Maybe some pieces, parts are laying around somewhere in our studio, but we have not activated them since ages.
Yeah, one example would be the anthroposcope. It's a microscope that has a special device attached to it. It was produced with the microscope but was not distributed widely. And at one point, I think it was created in 93, and in 96, there was an exhibition and they sent back all the material except that piece. They lost it. And I couldn't find it anymore because it was produced during the time of that microscope and it was not anymore. And for 25 years I've been looking for this piece, and one time I found it just last year actually. And then I could recreate the piece. Without this, it will not work. So it was really an issue, but it was luck that I found it again. It was on the kind of not a second-hand market on the internet, and it came from America actually. It was produced in Germany, so it was really a bad luck, a good luck actually to get it. And then I started to put this one again on display. Otherwise, it would have not been possible. So you see that when it's bound to a specific machine, we are really prisoner of that. But then we have to be more careful than to keep this piece actually as one.
Yeah, and in this particular case, we got an invitation from Mr. Hattinger to participate in the Weltmaschine-Ausstellung, which he curated also here at the OK Center, and he wanted to have this anthroposcope. So we told him, well, this has not been shown since ages, and we're not 100% sure if we can find this missing part. But then he said, yes, please go ahead, try at least. And finally, Laurent found it on the internet, and the piece was recreated. And it's almost as if it was from 93. So we're very happy that this old piece that has been almost dying now has been resurrected, basically. And I think it would be possible to do this with quite a few pieces that have not been shown. But, you know, it's always a matter of time and budget of doing those kind of recreations.
Yeah, it's of course for the artist difficult question. Do we spend time on the old works or spend time on the new work? You can't really do everything at once. So of course, making this old work is great, but then you are not creating new things at the same time. So that's always a matter of management and how much you can handle.
We have several collectors, like the ZKM has most pieces from us. They have interactive plant growing, they have Life Writer, they have also the Evolve belongs to them now, since they created it or recreated with us. Yes, plant growing. Then they have also Portrait on the Fly. I think these are the 4 pieces they have. And a bit of Nanoscape, it still belongs to us, but we are now recreating it together with ZKM as well. So they have the biggest collection of our works. Then we have also works in different, more private collections, like the Boirosan collection or the Thoma collection or the Beep collection. So there are several works in collections where they also usually have some technicians to help them make sure the works survive. And then there's also some private collectors, mostly smaller works that, you know, maybe works on paper or smaller pieces that are not so complicated. But we always try to have the really big, important pieces in really a good collection where we make sure that they can be taken care of, because it's not about the money, you know. It's more about making sure that these pieces are in a place where people know how to handle them and how to take care of them. And I see now more and more people, you know, interested in buying these kind of works. That brings you also to the question of edition. Sometimes it's smart to make editions, so you have really, you know, more chances to distribute the work to different places. But I think we see now, I mean, it started a bit also with this NFT and art discussions. I think now more and more people are interested in having interactive art or media artworks in also more contemporary art collections, which is a good thing.